Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 318 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. Well, I've been very lucky to be sent a national Uncapper by the team at beecooperative.org. It's a newly designed Uncapper, and today I'm joined by the co-inventors Martin and Peter for a chat on how the idea started and how it works. Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. This is an edited version of a Zoom conversation I had with Martin and Peter just last week. Hello, everyone. I'm joined by Martin and Peter from the Bee Cooperative on a very quick, well, it's supposed to be a quick Zoom chat, but I've just taken up the best part of 15 minutes talking about my beekeeping. So Peter and Martin are joining me to talk about their Uncapper. So you're very welcome, guys. Good to see you.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Stuart.
Do you want to tell me what your Uncapper is all about? Because you very kindly sent me one and I haven't yet used it, and I'm going to produce some videos showing how it works, but you're here to teach me how to use it, really, and just give us some background on how you decided to invent, design, produce, and retail this thing. Who wants to go first? Martin, do you want to kick off?
Okay. So I'm Martin. I've been a beekeeper for a few years, and I realised at the end of my first season that the uncapping part of extraction was a real opportunity to make a massive mess and to lose as much comb as you could. So I cast around the internet to see if there was some sort of system that would be better for uncapping than I could get currently. And I had tried knives and I tried forks and scrapers and various other things. And I found the twin roller system that's incorporated in various bits of kit. And there was one particularly badly designed one that the Americans are forced to use, unfortunately. And I thought, well, that's an interesting methodology, but it's a terrible design. We can do better than that. So I had a bit of a think and a sketch, and then I turned to my friend Pete, and we worked together in the past. We both have engineering backgrounds, and I knew that if I was going to produce something, it would take me quite a long time, and I didn't have all the skills necessary. So Pete and I got together for a second time to turn what was a sketch into a prototype and take it forward from there. So
how did that work out, Pete? How did Martin kind of approach you with a beer mat sketch, or was it something more official?
It was a bit of a chance meeting initially when we sort of just bumped into each other in town, and Martin said he had this idea. I had a bit of free time at that time, and I said, right, let's do it. My background is automotive F1 design, so I'm quite good with CAD, so it was no problem to sort of turn the sketches into solid models. Right. Come up with some ideas. The first model we did was far too complex. Simple is actually hard. It's the hardest thing to do in design or sometimes. So we just sort of went through a couple of iterations and came up with something that the first prototype worked really well. Again, you can never get everything done on screen on CAD. Sure. You always find things that aren't quite right. Oh, I should have thought of that sort of thing. But you only know that when you test it out. So we got through a couple of iterations and then arrived at something that we thought works really well. And we wanted to make sure that there was a good engineering sort of background in there, high quality product, and something that was going to last. Obviously, all food safe, and it was a really interesting project. And so far, the feedback has been really good from all.
Now you've got a website, haven't you? So I can put a link to the website, and that's the Beekeeping Cooperative.
Beecooperative.org.
Beecooperative.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, have you got one of these Uncappers there that you can talk us through and just explain what on earth we're talking about? Okay.
So here we go. So we created the national Uncapper because there was a gap in the market for our British national frames. Now, Stuart, you're clearly an awkward bugger because you've gone with the Langstroth version.
Course.
However, most UK beekeepers are using the national size, and actually, this one's covered in wax, so this is one we've used earlier. Yeah, so it's a high density polyethylene frame around the outside, and then there are twin aluminium rollers in the middle. It's really quite straightforward, as Pete has said. You push your frame between the rollers, and it cuts into the front face of the wax cappings, thereby opening them up for extraction. So it doesn't remove them.
I'm definitely not from an engineering background, and everybody that's seen my videos will know that just putting a nail into a piece of wood is quite difficult for me. So so that is that a rubber band on the end there? Is that what?
Yeah, so
it's tension.
Yeah, so the rollers are tensioned together. So at the moment it's actually a rubber nitrile O-ring. It's a standard component. Again, so there are some aspects of the Uncapper where we've made bespoke design, and where they're replaceable parts, they're very easy to replace. So this is a standard ordered component. We've got a drive wheel on the outside, so it's a single piece of aluminium milled, but the drive wheel on the outside allows you to increase from 1 O-ring to 2 O-rings to 3 O-rings. And that just increases the compression force. So you can adjust. If you've got fresh young wax, you might just need the one. I think in most occasions you just need the 2 bands. But if you've got a very hard wax, an old wax, which is very, very firm, and your frame isn't very well filled, then the 3rd ring will just give you that extra spring force that you need.
So when you're talking about rings, are you talking about the black band? Or
so this rubber black band it's known as an O-ring. So it has another purpose in life. It's a sort of gasket for various different systems, but it has it's got quite a slim cross section, so you can vary the spring force. We felt that was an important aspect.
Yeah, it's actually, funnily enough, it's probably one of the hardest things to come up with out of the whole design was finding the right O-ring. If you've probably never looked online at O-rings. I wouldn't expect you to have done, but there's thousands available, and trying to find the right O-ring, we got through probably about 30 different iterations of O-ring. You do all the calculations and it spits out, right, we should probably use this one, but yeah, that was the tricky bit, but we know what the right one is now.
Martin, so when you're saying 1, 2, and 3, are they different sized O-rings?
No, they're all the same O-rings. So it's an important part. So if you needed to order a spare, because an O-ring has a limited life, so we'd recommend you probably need to replace them every 2 years, but you could replace them each year.
Right.
An O-ring, it is made from a synthetic rubber, but the properties are quite consistent between the same set of O-rings, so you can predict how much spring force you're going to add. One of the things this poor quality American version of this has a single O-ring, and the O-ring is mounted inside the frame. So it doesn't stretch like ours. You can't produce any sort of give in the system. And it immediately gets covered in honey, which is excellent for lubricating, so you lose any of your friction. So it doesn't do, when I rotate one of these, it will rotate the other one beside it. So it doesn't really do any particular job. What we engineered in was a nice amount of travel. So if you've got a really fat frame, then your spindle, your cutting surface can move. And there's some.
This is going to sound, you're going to roll your eyes at me. So when you say 1, 2, and 3, is there an adjustment on the actual Uncapper that you change it from 1, 2 to 3?
Have we got the spindle that we can show, Stuart?
Yes, we'll go and get a spindle.
Yeah, we'll get a loose spindle so you can see the different settings. It's a little tricky with the webcam.
So it's on the spindle itself.
Yeah, that spindle is a single piece.
Yeah.
And if I turn it to an oblique angle,
I see it.
You can see that the O-ring is.
That's fine. I can see that. Yeah.
Wrapped around. So it's a figure of 8. So if you rotate one, the other one will rotate in the opposite direction. So when you're pushing your your frame through, like a technical poster, the rollers roll together. It doesn't drag or cut.
Okay.
It rolls and presses. And
Yep.
then when you pull it back out again, it travels again. So Pete's got
Yeah,
one of
this
these.
is just showing the end detail, and the O-rings, they just fit into the grooves, and there's 3 grooves. So each time you add an O-ring, you're just adding more force onto the rollers, basically more tension. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right. So you have one O-ring, and you would put that on if you've got very young wax on the frame. Is that what
Yeah.
you're
So
saying?
one change we made between the Mark 1 and the Mark 2 was just to change some of the geometry. So a lot of the design is in the geometry, and it's amazing at what a difference a millimeter will make. So between Mark 1 and Mark 2, we increased the spacing between the spindles by 1.5 millimeters. And that makes quite a large amount of difference. So it stops you from cutting too deep into the wax.
Yeah.
If you were to cut too deep, what tends to happen is it pulls the face of the wax off rather than making an impression into it.
Okay.
So with that narrower focus, you do need two O-rings, generally speaking. We only put one on when we send it to you.
Okay.
Because that just stops them from bashing around in transit.
The penny has dropped. When you say 1, 2, and 3, you're talking about the number of O-rings that you put on, and not a different size or a different position on the spindle.
Well, they go in a different position, but so we've got one on this one here, and then you can add a second one. So there's one on there. Just pop that one on around, twist it round. A little fiddly, but you get used to it after a while.
Yeah, sure.
Now we've got 2 bands on there, so that's doubled the spring force.
Okay.
And if you had a really, really hard wax, an old wax that wasn't very well filled, and you needed to make sure that the spindles didn't push apart, a 3rd band would give you a really strong compressive force.
Right. But generally speaking, 1 or 2 is going to be sufficient.
2 I think, is the default setting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So, Peter, you said that you had a frame that you could possibly demonstrate.
Yeah. Right. Okay, Pete.
So
it's just demonstrating how you mount the Uncapper to the tray.
Okay. We were talking prior to recording. We were talking about the fact that this is a really useful clip-top box.
Yeah, so it's a completely standard item. I've already using them to save my frames over the winter, the ones that have been cleared out.
Okay.
So we know it works with the national sized.
And it's food safe, isn't it?
It's food safe. It's made from polyethylene, and as I say, we never intended to send these around to people. We thought that our customers would have their own tray and that they would just bolt their Uncapper to their tray. But actually, I think from the convenience perspective, most of our customers are buying it with the really useful box. Yeah. So Peter's just he's adding an extra O-ring to each end because at the moment that one's just got one on. So this is in fact last year's model. We made a couple of improvements that we can run through with you from there. We had the question as to whether or not this national version would uncap a Smith frame.
Okay.
And when we looked at the Smith frames again, they had shorter lugs.
Yes.
So we just made a slight change to the end piece. There's a little chamfer that we've created. So we didn't change the geometry, but it allows you need to get your finger in underneath to lift to pull it out via the lug. So that facilitates that. If you've got a Smith frame, then this Uncapper will fit that. And because the Langstroth has a shorter lug on the top bar as well, we've continued that design through all the different versions that we're producing.
Cool. Okay.
And
it looks like the frame sits nicely in the box as well. So can you load up your frame?
Can you risk a second frame to put more than one through? Or, we've only got a certain number of frames, and as you know, once you uncap,
sure,
you're then having to
definitely
towards extraction fairly.
Spin
it around.
So it's quite a nice.
Yeah, it's evenly. If you imagine trying to uncap that with a knife,
sure,
it's only just proud of the frame itself. So it would be.
So for that side, that's nicely.
And that's it. Just one
That's it, yeah.
Sometimes we run it through again.
Yeah. So I think for this one, because it's not been very well filled, it's some of those cuts haven't gone through the wax cappings. So it's a tool. You get used to it.
Just run
Yeah.
it through.
Yeah,
Just
just
a little bit of angle.
Yeah. So Pete's just pushing it through in the same position with a little bit of an angle towards
yeah.
the roller, and that has now uncapped that side.
And
that
so
side.
the discs are set at a particular distance so that they go through every single cell as you push down.
Yep, they're 4.9 mil centers, and
Okay.
they're just less than a millimeter, 0.9 mil in the thickness of the blade. So it should uncap on a standard foundation.
And to be honest, the process you've just done, where you've kind of had to hold the frame at a slight angle, is exactly what I have to do with our Carl Fritz brush uncapper. But of course, for me, with the Carl Fritz uncapper, I can only do one side at a time. So I'm having to then turn the frame around and use it twice. So I'm actually already thinking I'm going to look forward to using this because it cuts the time down in half, really.
Yeah. Well, I think what you'll find after a few frames, Stuart, is you'll get to learn your new tool, and you spot very quickly what if you need to dress the frame, if there's comb that's been built up on the top bar.
Okay.
You're not going to get to that. This is
heavy.
Yeah, this is a plastic.
We haven't tried a plastic frame yet. So.
Sure.
Right, there you go.
There we go. So that's
okay.
Yeah.
Uncapped there, and what's the other side like? That's all.
That's all uncapped as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
So you can see it's starting to drip honey now from the rollers into.
And just from a practical perspective, how warm is the room in there? Because are those frames relatively warm? Is the honey warm inside? Because
I'd say we're about 21 in here.
Lately, I mean, yeah, it's just I guess it hasn't been super warm today, and the door's been open, so we're 21 degrees.
Okay. So at just one point that might be relevant, if people allow those frames to cool a little bit, when we bring our supers back, they go into a warm room and we have the temperature in there at around 28 degrees. And I think that's going to really help prevent the discs from kind of picking up the honey when it's more viscous. Because the honey inside is kept warm, it runs really easily. So I think if you've got cold frames with honey in, they might well kind of catch a disc and drag a little bit.
Yeah, we don't find that happens particularly.
Okay.
I mean, a little bit has caught on in one area from one of the frames there.
Right. Okay.
It does happen. I think what I tend to do if I'm processing, I'm not going to do two frames. I'll get 50, 100 frames ready to go in one go.
Yeah, exactly.
And you would line up all the underfilled ones, and then and you go through that lot. And then if you've got some really fat ones, you might want to take one of your O-rings off the end to reduce the compressive force.
Okay.
And then if you've got some really bumpy ones, they're always going to be a bit tricky. So you might take the knife to them beforehand just to trim up in some areas. But Pete's being very delicate here and showing it going through. But we had a customer report back to us. He was so pleased. He's written us a review, and he did 8 supers in an hour.
Fantastic.
So he wasn't hanging around. He was going through them.
Yeah. And in terms of those rollers, Martin, looking at them as they are, you've got some buildup of wax on them. When you're using it, does that wax get compressed at all? Does it cause any issues? Do you have to clean the rollers at all?
No, that's a question we get. So I, as part of our prototype testing, I took one of these along to the Petersfield and District Beekeeping Association Extraction Day last year. And I think we had 20 novices and we had 20 experienced beekeepers. And we ran through, I think, about 400 frames in the afternoon, and it didn't need cleaning off in that time.
Wow, that's great.
So you do pick a bit up.
Sure.
The other question is, how do you clean them off? And we've had suggestions of clever tools and things, but actually your garden hose with the jet wash attachment on the end, just to give it the high pressure, run it up and down, rotate it a quarter, it blows the wax pieces out the other side. So it's really keeping it simple.
You can unbolt it and run it under the warm.
Yep, you could do that. I just hose mine off outside. So
fantastic. Great. Well, thanks for the demonstration. That was really worthwhile seeing. I feel a whole lot more confident in unboxing the one that you've sent me and hitching it up to our uncapping tray and seeing how we can get on with it. Is there anything else, any other advice that you need to make me aware of before I dive into making a fool of myself?
Yeah. Well, I don't think you'll make a fool of yourself, but so we had really early on in our testing. I went round to again. I'm a member of Petersfield District, and we got a lot of experienced beekeepers through there. And I bothered quite a lot of them, the semi-commercial guys and girls, and got them to test it out and get feedback, because that's what's really important.
Sure.
And we had one really experienced beekeeper who specializes in a 9 frame per super setup, and he gets much fatter frames, so the geometry is very different.
Okay.
And he found that the setup we had at the time just wasn't working for him.
Okay.
Actually, because his frames are so proud, the knife was what he wanted to do. Now, we don't have to do any wax reprocessing, because you just get a little bit in your sieve and that's it.
Yeah.
But he's dealing with the sheets of wax, but it didn't work for him. So we decided to come up with a way to space the rollers further apart if you're on that 9 frame, or indeed if you've got manly sidebars on your national frames.
So I've got both.
Okay. So we have a spacer for both those eventualities.
Which should be in your box of parts.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
So Pete has a 3D printer, and
Obviously.
let's see, we'll put
There we
this
are.
up here.
Okay.
If you can, at some point it'll focus in, and this 3D printed spacer has 4 millimeters printed into it.
Okay, right.
And you can see a couple of buttons on the outside. So if we demonstrate, all we're doing now is altering the base geometry.
Okay.
So in order to let's imagine we've got very, very well filled frames from your 9 frame setup. You take your spacer bar,
Yeah.
you put one end on one axle, push them apart. That's now sitting between the axles.
That's easy.
And then you just pull it in towards you, and it clips into place. You've got the two holes in the end which it's slotted into, and that's changed the geometry. Now it'll be perfect for your 9 frame.
Definitely have to use those. I don't know, how you guys feel about your beekeeping, but every now and again you see something that you get a little bit excited about, and just that little 3D printed clip that's going to go in there has got me quite excited. I genuinely do look forward to using it.
I love the technology in 3D printing. So this is also it's got a food grade coating, food safe coating on it, and also the coating, it provides a very low level of friction, so it enables the spindles can still rotate easily. So
we're doing another extraction on Thursday, so I'm going to get this set up on Thursday, and we'll get the camera rolling and do a video. I really appreciate you coming on to chat to me before I embark on this extraction. It looks really good, I have to say, guys. I'm really impressed with it. So I'm sure that it's going to work really well. Even if I can make it work, then there's not a beekeeper out there that can't. Just talking about your website finally, those O-rings, you can't just nip down to B&Q and buy O-rings, presumably, because they're a particular size and a particular type. So you've got spares on your website, have you?
We do. We have spares of all the items that could perish, and they are not expensive. So we're selling 10 replacement pack of 10 for £7.
Okay, cool.
So,
and you said you replace them every couple of years?
Yeah, so the material, the nitrile material is it's photosensitive. So if you left it out in the sun, if you covered it in oil, it might have an adverse reaction, and it would just change the elastic properties. Therefore,
Right.
But we had a customer the other day who asked the question, how often will it break? Well, we've broken one so far.
Right.
We've done over 1,000 frames, but I would recommend changing them each season, and I wouldn't leave them in tension on the Uncapper all the time.
Yeah.
So if you just take care of them, they'll definitely last the season, probably 2, and then replace them after that.
Yeah, I just like the idea of going to your website and being able to get exactly the right thing. Like you were saying, there are probably thousands of these things.
Yeah.
And for me, as a non-engineer, not even a DIYer, to go out and try and source the right O-ring, it's just too easy to come to you guys and make sure I get the right one. So,
We have a box of a lot of tried O-rings that didn't work, so
yeah.
it's quite
Cool.
quite a large
And
box.
before I go, before I let you guys go, is there anything else that you'd like to add to? Oh, what's your website address?
It's www.beecooperative.org.
Simple as that. Okay. Pete, anything you'd like to add?
No, I mean, thank you very much for your time. It's really interesting to talk to you. And if anyone has any questions, please just get in touch. We love hearing feedback as well about using it. You know, what if there's any issues or anything.
Right.
So
We're keen to solve problems. And
so we're going to be at the National Honey Show in October, and that was great. The first year, just meeting our customers and talking to them about it really helped us.
Sure.
We describe it and frame it. So we will see people there.
Thank you for coming along and chatting.
Thank you, Stuart.
And we'll doubtless we'll do this again, because there might be, we might need to have a debrief once the final frame has been uncapped.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Well, that's it for this week. Don't forget to check out my website, www.norfolk-honey.co.uk, and for my latest videos and podcasts with more updates, tips and techniques, it's the same Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Norfolk Honey. And remember, I'm Stewart Spinks, and that was Beekeeping Short and Sweet.